It's River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer. Iowa has a proud tradition of nurturing writers who push boundaries and challenge conventions. Today, we listen back to an archive show with an author who exemplifies that tradition. Daniel Kraus grew up in Fairfield. He graduated from the University of Iowa and has gone on to become one of the most versatile and prolific writers in America today. He's a New York Times best-selling author who has collaborated with filmmakers Guillermo del Toro and George Romero. He's written over 25 books, spanning multiple genres and earning comparisons to Cormac McCarthy for his visceral, poetic prose. In May, Kraus was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for his novel Angel Down. It's a World War I narrative with a celestial twist that unfolds over nearly 300 pages in one long sentence. In this conversation that I had with Daniel Kraus about the book, this is before he won the Pulitzer, he also shares the inspirations he gained from an Iowa rabbi, a beloved professor at the University of Iowa, Jay Holstein. By the way, one of my favorite professors at the UI as well. Angel Down, set during the First World War, follows 5 American soldiers who discover a fallen angel on the battlefield. And what begins as a supernatural thriller becomes a meditation on violence, human nature, and the self-perpetuating machine of war. So now let's listen back to my conversation from February of 2026 with Fairfield native and Pulitzer Prize winner Daniel Kraus. Daniel, welcome to River.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I wanted to get, of course, to your latest book, Angel Down, but before that, let's talk a little bit, if we could, about your upbringing here in Iowa. You've talked about watching horror films like Night of the Living Dead with your mother when you were just 5 years old, right in Fairfield. That really seems like an unusual childhood experience.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're ignorant.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're acting like a child.
They're coming for you.
What drew your mother to share that sort of film with you? How did they become, as you've described, a safe space? This is a 1968 film by George Romero, really the father of the zombie movie.
Yeah, that's right. You know, when you're a kid, you don't think about what's right or proper because you don't have any of those kind of guidelines yet. So all I knew, it was something my mom liked, you know, and it was something that she shared with me. And I had 2 sisters, and they weren't involved. So it was kind of a special thing between the 2 of us. And Night of the Living Dead, because of a copyright issue, was just always on TV. And even more regular than that was Twilight Zone. We would watch Twilight Zone every Friday. And because she was having so much fun, although sometimes I was a little scared, it never felt like a particularly scary situation because it was something fun, really. And I think that, you know, Rod Serling and George Romero, the creators of those 2 pieces of art, were really forward-thinking American artists, and I got real lucky, I think, in that.
Yeah,
they led me in a good direction.
I'm a huge fan of Twilight Zone as well. What's your favorite episode, dude? What springs to mind there?
You know, there's an episode called Night Call. It's not one of the most famous episodes, about an old woman who keeps getting phone calls from her dead husband. And I think it's one of the scariest things I've ever seen. It just creeps me out. His voice on the phone is just, I get chills thinking about it.
Daniel, you've set multiple novels in Iowa, Rotters, The Ghost That Ate Us, Scowler, and I've read that you've said Iowa scares you, that wide open spaces feel somehow claustrophobic to you. For listeners, perhaps driving past those farmhouses here in Iowa or anywhere in the Midwest right now on their way home or to work, what is it about Iowa landscape that makes it such fertile ground for horror for you?
I think anyone is going to have very complicated feelings about the place they grew up in. I think if you have any sort of ability to sort of pull back and look objectively, semi-objectively at your life. And I don't know that I felt these things or understood that I felt these things as a kid growing up there.
Mm-hmm.
But in retrospect, if you look at wide open spaces and look at individual little farmhouses sort of dotting the terrain, they're almost like islands in an ocean. And certainly pre-internet, pre-cell phone, it sort of felt like islands. Like you were nowhere near anywhere else. You weren't close to help. Anything could be going on inside those houses and you would have no idea. So I think there is something intrinsically abandoning about these places, which is quite different from a city where you're always within one wall away from other people, for good and for worse.
Mm-hmm. A little bit more about your Iowa influence at the University of Iowa you attended. In fact, your first film came out of a class project at the University of Iowa. And Daniel, we have something in common. You also had Rabbi Jay Holstein for a class. I had him as a class. He was a great inspiration. But for you, he seems to have been much more a mentor. He died in 2025. How did Jay Holstein, in your time at Iowa, the University of Iowa, shape you or inspire you into filmmaking and your writing?
It's interesting because Jay was a religion professor, and I only ever took 2 classes with him, but they were probably the most 2 impactful classes. It was the very first class I took in college and the very last class I took. So he sort of bookended my experience. And I didn't come away with it with like a particular, wealth of knowledge of religious study. It was not a field that I pursued very heavily. But he taught me how to think, like having had him as a teacher too, you know what I mean? Like he taught you how to interpret a text and how to look at it and how to dig deeper into it. And he made the idea of plumbing the depths of art, whether it's a film or a movie or an artwork of any kind or a song, exciting. Like you felt like Indiana Jones sort of unwrapping the layers of whether it was Ecclesiastes in the Bible or Old Man in the Sea, or some work by Arthur C. Clarke. It made intellectual pursuits feel like adventure almost.
Yeah. I remember that from Gilgamesh in his class. I took a Quest for Human Destiny.
Yes, that was one of them.
Probably 10 years before you did. I was there in the mid-'80s. And the scene there, for our listeners to understand, Jay Holstein, what a remarkable lecturer. There were hundreds of us in the auditorium, 800 or 900 as I remember, and his lectures, legendary, dynamic, irreverent. We have to say irreverent, but infused with cultural references, humors. He was a crowd pleaser, but also really opened the doors to these sort of ancient texts, right?
Yes. And, a lot of my most popular or not even that, books that I feel the happiest about, also do plumb some of those religious topics like Whalefall and Angel Down. Some of that comes directly from Jay Holstein.
Did you share any of the writing of those with him, bounce it off him while he was alive?
No. I mean, we talked about some stuff. I would occasionally turn to him for questions. I would, when I was writing this big 2-volume project called The Death and Life of Zebulon Finch, I occasionally would email him for some piece of, usually it was some biblical text or something that I was trying to get an angle on. I was like, I would write something like, "Hey Jay, I'm at Job verse whatever, and this is my interpretation of it. And what do you think about this?" And he'd always write back, and he was like this in classes too, if you remember. He would never give me a straight answer. Like he would not give you this solution. He would sort of indicate in subtle ways if he thought you were on the right track or not, but he made you fight for it. Like I remember in Quest for Human Destiny, he was going to tell us a secret about Catcher in the Rye that he had dug out of the text, but only if we proved ourselves by the end of the semester by being a good enough class, and we failed. He didn't tell us.
You never found out that secret about Catcher?
No, because we were not up to his standards. He did it in a nice way, but he made you work.
Yeah. And see if this rings true to you. I have an anecdote. Years after taking his class, I was away in Europe for over a decade, then came back and reconnected with him and invited him on this talk show. This would have been 15 years ago. I think it was at the first years of the Iraq War. And I'm vaguely remembering that he had a son
Yes.
who was in that war, right?
Right.
And so that was kind of a peg for talking with him. But he was a very intense man.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. We have to take a short break in just a moment, but we have just enough time for you to perhaps set up. We want to dive right into your new novel, Angel Down, here. And you mentioned a connection to Iowa, to the University of Iowa, to Rabbi Jay Holstein there, perhaps as a way of a setup. And then we'll hear you read from your book after the break. You can draw a line from your Iowa experience to Angel Down.
Well, I always have characters that are from Iowa, and the main character in Angel Down is indeed from Iowa. And I think connecting Angel Down to Holstein is even easier because it does deal a lot with the idea of biblical angels and biblical justice. And Holstein had very interesting thoughts on what was justice and what we could even perceive in our measly little human lives, what we could even begin to appreciate about God if he exists, like what he would want from us. So it's this and Whalefall, my novel previous to this, are the most indebted to Holstein for sure.
I've just finished Whalefall as well. What an incredible book. And I think the film version of that coming out in late 2026 this year?
October, yeah.
October. Okay, we'll be back after a short break and talk more with Daniel Kraus, author of the new, fairly new national bestseller, Angel Down. It's a book that follows 5 American soldiers. They discover a fallen angel on a World War I battlefield. We'll be back with more from Daniel Kraus after a short break. It's River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer, and today you're listening to an archive edition of River to River. My guest this hour, the Fairfield native, grew up around Fairfield, I should say, University of Iowa graduate. He's the author of over 25 books. He's collaborated with Guillermo del Toro, also George Romero. His previous novel, Whalefall, is being adapted into a major motion picture starring Josh Brolin. It's expected release October of 2026. Angel Down is his latest novel, named one of the New York Times top 10 books of 2025. It is a novel. World War I have a fascination for World War I, but it's a novel unlike anything you've read. The entire 285-page book is written, get this, as a single continuous sentence that loops back on itself, sort of trapping readers in this endless cycle of what you might interpret as mechanized warfare. And there are 5 American soldiers who venture into no man's land. They discover in that no man's land not a wounded comrade, but a fallen angel. I guess I'll stop there because Daniel Kraus, you've been listening to that. I hope I did a brief sort of catch-up summary without any spoilers there for you.
Yeah, I mean, you got it right.
Okay. If I can ask you to read a passage from early in your book.
Sure.
Because really one of the beauties of this is to get a sense of the rhythm. I found reading it was one thing, but then reading it aloud, it has almost a musical nature, your prose.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's once you commit to the idea of writing a single sentence over the entire book, you lose all the normal tricks. I don't know if they're called tricks or not, but the normal tools you have, which are periods and paragraph breaks and indents. You lose all that stuff, and you have to rely instead on rhythm. So no matter what I'm doing in the prose, there's kind of like this beat. I always compare it to the sound of tires over pavement. Like it's just sort of you stop hearing it after a while, but it's always there, and therefore it does have a certain rhythm to it, I think.
Mm-hmm. What would you like to read?
Well, I'll just read off the very first page of the book, I think.
Daniel Kraus reading from his novel Angel Down from the very first page.
And Cyril Bagger considers himself lucky. He ought to be topped off, gone west, bumped, clicked it, pushing daisies, a new landowner, napooed, just plain dead. Not only dead, but scattered around in globs. For the last thing he saw was a shell dropping on top of him with the noise of colliding freight trains. A Jim Dandy of a shot from Fritzy the Hun. And kind of ironic, seeing how the whole reason Bagger prefers burial duty is artillery shells can't reach this far behind the front line trench. But this shell sure did, the way he always pictures it in dreams, a red skull of fire screaming down, giving him 1 second to think that old Bagger luck has finally run out, and the afterlife, for the brief time he knew it, had been delectable, as he was gentled back into the arms and the long, long legs of Mary Louise, the prostitute on whom he'd lavished all his francs when the butcher birds of the 43rd had been stationed in Vosges, pretty, dry, warm, quiet, bloodless Vosges, where every inhale was Mary Louise La Rose Jacquemart perfume, her rosewater hair and periwinkle powders, every exhale the flutter of her dyed red hair and the lace whatchamacallits of her lingerie.
Daniel Kraus reading the opening of his novel Angel Down. So Cyril Bagger is an Iowan. This fictional character is an Iowan. There are others. Cyril is, let's talk about him for a moment. He's a con man, a card shark. He's also a self-described coward who has survived, when we join him, the war. This is late in World War I, by avoiding combat, right?
Yeah, he's essentially created a way, various ways to stay off the front lines. So he either uses some sort of sleight of hand tricks when playing poker or dice to get other soldiers to fight in his stead, and then also has made himself the best gravedigger around because the gravediggers are behind the trench and further away from artillery shells. And so, yeah, he doesn't think, I mean, he might kind of ironically call himself a coward, but he also thinks he's really smart. Like he's figured this out, and who cares who else dies as long as he survives. That's where he starts anyway.
Mm-hmm. And Cyril Bagger is sent into no man's land with 4 other soldiers, Arno, Popkin, Godspeed, and Vec. I don't know if you want to say anything about them, why you created this specific group. They're all misfits, outcasts, right?
Yeah, they're all purportedly the 5 worst soldiers. When the division has to sort of move on, the commander, Major General Rice, chooses the 5 worst soldiers to stay behind for this repellent task of having to go into no man's land and essentially euthanize a soldier who seems to be caught in the barbed wire somewhere and screaming. So yeah, it's a bunch of misfits, a bunch of bad guys, really. One of them is a child. There were a lot of children who lied about their ages to get into the army. And he's not really a bad guy, but he's definitely not a very good soldier.
Mm-hmm. That's Arno, the boy that Bagger has a soft spot for. We have Vec, who's a flamethrower operator, Goodspeed, a sort of a greedy guy, and Popkin. He's the one I can't really like. He's thuggish, right?
No, I mean, the idea when creating these characters, typically characters grow much more organically than this. But in this case, I wanted to think about if there were a group of men and they found an angel, and that angel was capable of miracles, of almost anything, what are the different ways in which men could try to exploit her for their own good, for their own means? And so I created each character to represent those different kinds of exploitation.
Mm-hmm.
So they were sort of means to an end in a way. And then as I write, they kind of come to life.
Right. They sure do. And this is where the most fascinating part of the book begins for me. I found the prelude, all leading up to finding the angel, fascinating, but also gory, I have to say. When these soldiers find this angel in no man's land, tangled in some barbed wire, she appears differently to each of them as, I guess, women they recognize. What does the angel represent? Why does she take these different forms?
Well, part of me wants to be like Professor J. Holstein and not really tell you. Uh, that's part of what I learned from him was that to tell someone exactly what she represents is robbing them of
I see.
the pursuit of that and also the kind of delicious ambiguity of that. Like I want everyone to sort of have their own take on it. But what I can say is the men all see in the angel somebody that they would want to protect, and that's not clear right away in the book, but it increasingly becomes clear as the chapters go by that she has created herself in a way to be whatever these individual men need to want to save her.
Mm.
But the problem, of course, and this is sort of the crux of the book, is that what should be this sort of miraculous encounter turns into the opposite. Like it becomes this hellish experience because each of them are so hell-bent on using her for their own purposes that they begin to self-destruct and destroy each other because they want her.
Mm-hmm. This book is viscerally, graphically violent. There's blood, gore, body parts, mud, awful, everywhere mixed in with the mud. I see it just reading it. I just see it and how horrible the First World War in the trenches was. But I wonder for you as a writer creating this, how did you balance showing the horror of war, which I don't doubt it was, without becoming gratuitous?
I know this sounds weird, but I just didn't care. Like the one thing that I took most from all my research about World War One was just that no matter what I could imagine in terms of how harrowing the violence was, the reality was worse. That I could not think of anything in my most creative methods of taking a body apart that I wouldn't then find something worse in my research. And it was perpetual. You woke up amid death. You slept literally amid body parts. There was no end to it. There was no break from it. You dreamt it. You woke up all night through it. That's one of the reasons the book's in one sentence, because it never ends. You can never turn off your radar. You can never relax. And the visceralness and the intensity of the violence and the gruesomeness was so pervasive that I just let it fly.
Yeah.
I let it just exist everywhere. And, in some books, it may be like you let the violence come out here and there. But in this one, it was more like the violence is everywhere. And the beauty is what sort of pokes its buds above the soil every once in a while. And the beauty becomes the surprise.
Mm-hmm. If you just joined us, Daniel Kraus with us this hour discussing his extraordinary novel, Angel Down. So it's fair to say, based on what you said, Daniel, that while it is just horrifying to read, being in the trenches with Cyril Bagger and others here, this is a fictional work, but nothing about the conditions are exaggerated based on your research.
No, not at all. I mean, I try generally in most of my books, I try to be very realistic, and I love research. My only issue with research is I have to stop myself at some point. You can really lose yourself in research and then become paralyzed because you almost know too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole milieu in which the book is set, it's all very real. I created an entire fictional division of the army, but right down to I knew every single commander of every brigade, every regiment, every company. I got to know the command structure, and that was all very helpful to hand create all of these things, all of the weapons that were used, all of the jargon that was used, so that I was sort of suffused in it, and it would come out kind of naturally.
Yeah. What was the most valuable source for your World War I research?
I don't know if I can answer that. There was so much of it, and frankly, it was so many years ago at this point. I mean, I probably wrote this book 3 years
When did
ago.
you start this, or when did you write this?
What came out last year, so 2025, that means I probably wrote it in 2023. And sometimes, when I do books, there is sort of a master text that I can point to and say, this was the guiding light. But in this one, there wasn't. There were, because the text in World War I, they're at such different scales. Like I would read these giant 1,000-page books that just dealt with the war at the 10,000-foot level, like the strategy of the armies and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But then you get personal memoirs that are just deep into the muck and the mud and are just about individual daily feelings. So it all became kind of a whirlwind. In a way, it almost feels like the book itself, which is this kind of rushing, tumbling sentence that has no central point, has no beginning or end. And that's kind of how the research felt. I don't know where to pinpoint any of it. It all just became one sort of overwhelming thing.
Yeah. I understand that your editor bought Angel down with a one-page synopsis and also, incredibly, without knowing about the single-sentence structure you had in mind?
Well, yeah, that's all true, but I didn't know about it then either. I
didn't know about what?
The fact that it was going to be one sentence.
Oh, you hadn't decided yet?
No, it hadn't even occurred to me.
Oh.
I started the book. I probably wrote, I don't know, let's say 30 pages or so in a much more traditional style. And it was working fine, but it wasn't electrifying me. And I was vaguely disappointed in it. And I really just sat down. I don't ever do this really, and thought about, just sort of mentally crunched through the themes of the book and what's this book really about. And I came upon after a while that it was really about this sort of, as you said in your introduction, this kind of cycle of mechanized violence and warfare. Mm-hmm. And how once it started, and my hypothesis was mechanized warfare that sort of feeds itself, began with World War I primarily, sort of with the assembly line approach to creating weapons and tanks and men as well. What would be a good way to reproduce that in style? Yeah. And I thought, well, what if it's one sentence that never ends, that loops back in on itself? So when you finish the book, you're really just right back at the start. And once you start the book, you can never really finish it. It's an infinite loop.
Right. And as war and humanity, war during humanity has been, it's infinite, it seems.
Yeah, that's right. So it's one of those nice moments, and it's only happened in a few of my books, where I feel like the style and the theme really dovetail in a really nice, effective way. Like the one thing that irks me is when I read books, and I've probably written a couple of them, where it feels like the style is happenstance. Like this person just likes writing first person present tense or whatever. Mm-hmm. When it should be a far more considered choice. Like there's nothing more important to a book than the voice of it. Inevitably, that is the slowest part of any book for me, is those first 5, 10, 15 pages, which I'll write and rewrite, just trying to figure out, what does this book sound like? Mm. And when I finally happened upon the one sentence idea, I wrote, probably about as much as I read aloud here a few minutes ago. Mm-hmm. And that was all I needed. I was like, this is it. I feel like my typing fingers are on fire now. Like I didn't ever want to stop.
You remember that day from starting and discovering that for yourself?
Oh, yeah. Now, I didn't know if anyone else would like it. Like that was a big question. Like I felt like I had stumbled on something I really wanted to write. But as previously mentioned, I didn't know what the hell my editor would think when she read it, because I didn't tell her about it until I handed it in. And I didn't know what I had, because of the style, I got so sort of lost inside of it that for the first time since my very first book, so, that's 24 books ago, I was nervous about a book. Like I was nervous about handing it in because I had lost perspective on if it was maybe the best thing I'd ever written, or maybe an utter disaster. Like, I just couldn't tell. The style was so unusual.
Yeah. We have to take a short break. Daniel Kraus, my guest this hour. Extraordinary novel, Angel Down, his latest. He mentioned, 24 before this, other types of books. Named one of the New York Times top 10 books of 2025. Raised in the Fairfield area, University of Iowa graduate. And he wrote this entire World War I novel as a single, might say, breathless sentence. Back with more from Daniel Kraus. It's River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer, and today you're listening to an archive edition of our program. It's a World War I novel unlike anything you've ever read. The entire nearly 300-page book is written as a single, continuous sentence, looping back on itself and sort of trapping readers in an endless cycle of mechanized warfare. 5 American soldiers, the main characters here in no man's land, they discover what turns out to be not a wounded comrade, but a fallen angel who could end the war. And we'll stop there to prevent any spoilers. Daniel Kraus, the author, here with us this hour. Daniel, World War I was when technology advanced beyond the human element, when we learned to kill without looking at the people we're killing. Is that what you find remarkable about World War I and why you chose this setting?
There were a number of things, but the most striking thing was as you sort of intuited there, the misalignment between human war techniques and the technology we were using to kill. So if we were still basically using Napoleonics, we were lining up in a line, and the enemy was lining up in a line, and we were sort of running at each other. And that's bad enough when everyone's got bayonets and they're locked in some sort of hand-to-hand combat or whatever. But once you have things like the Maxim machine gun and artillery shells that can fly so far that you have to figure in the curvature of the earth, it stops making sense. And all you do is the people have nothing, the soldiers have nothing to protect themselves except for the bodies of other soldiers. And that made the war, that has always haunted me about the war. And what, along with that, is the futility of it. Mm-hmm. I don't know of another war that was so, after its sort of introductory act, was so locked. Like thousands and thousands of people would die every single week. And it was all over sometimes a few feet of land. A few feet of land that no one could ever want because it's completely destroyed.
Right, and sometimes thousands in a day, not just a week. I don't know if it's the Psalm. You're fresh into this probably, but I mean, coming out of the trenches and just literally every man dying.
Yeah, they would be forced to run at the other trench through little holes that they snipped in the barbed wire barricade, which would just create a bottleneck. So the enemy would just point their machine guns at the little bottleneck and just turn people to liquid, just one after the other. So it was a horrific war being fought with techniques that no longer worked, and it was just slaughter for no apparent reason at all, because there was no land being taken or given, but it just kept going.
This will be a reminder of what we're experiencing, not what we're experiencing, thank goodness, but what's happening in Ukraine right now. I wonder if you can draw the line for us from World War I, where we are today, because drones and AI warfare has taken it even a step further.
Right. I mean, the thing is, once World War I with the new weaponry, particularly the artillery, it's all about the far-flying artillery. And very importantly, it's the artillery shell that knocks down the Angel. The artillery was shooting so much further and higher than ever before. The sort of conceit of the book is the shells fly up into this zone in the sky where angels might be. And that zone had always been safe up until now. Mm-hmm. So the problem is, once you stop that sort of hand-to-hand combat and you stop having to see the person you're killing, and you're back a few miles with the artillery gun, it becomes ever so slightly easier to kill. And you keep moving that forward into the modern day drone warfare, where now you're just kind of pushing a button on a console, and it's even easier to kill. And once we have AI fighting our wars for us, it's going to become even easier to wipe our hands of it. And suddenly it's like killing becomes no more different than killing on a video game. It's a terrible thought that makes sense emotionally on the individual level, because who wants to look into the eyes of the person they're killing? But that creates sort of a hell on earth, because we no longer care, and we can sleep well at night, and we should not be able to sleep well at night while these things are happening.
Yeah. In fact, the drone warfare is also something present now in Iowa. I think it's the 132nd Wing of the Iowa National Guard based in Des Moines, formerly a fighter wing that flew F-16s. They've transitioned to remotely piloted aircraft, and that happened within the last few years. So there you have it. You mentioned the artillery and angels in the sky, and it was an artillery shell that presumably took down this fictional angel into no man's land. Your main character, Cyril Bagger from Iowa, carries his father, the bishop's Bible from his father, but it's not for faith. It's the smell of the leather, I think, to a time before his heart filled with smoke. What role does faith, religion, or the absence of it play in your story here, Daniel?
Yeah, there's a lot of religion here, but it is, as you've sort of isolated, it is more about faith than it is religion. Faith in sort of one another. It's very purposeful that Bagger is not religious in the slightest, but the totem he carries around with him to remind him of a time when he was safer is a Bible. He doesn't believe anything between the covers, I mean, but it reminds him of something. It reminds him of a better time. He feels sort of ineffably safer just having it, just holding it and smelling it. And I feel like, they say there are no atheists in foxholes, right? So it makes sense that in a war, that everyone would turn towards some sort of larger God-like figure to protect them. But Bagger resists that for very specific reasons, because of his father actually being a minister and feeling let down by his father, and feeling that he was sort of, despite being kind of swallowed in this church that he grew up with, that it never meant anything to him personally. But the faith, the real faith he finds is in his fellow man. And as we discussed at the top of the interview, Bagger goes into the war entirely believing, he's convinced himself that he needs no one. That when he screws over his fellow soldiers to save himself, who cares? But his sort of journey in this book, which only takes place over, less than 2 days, is to understand, is to care about a single other person. Like, that's almost the deal the angel makes with him at one point in the book. If he can just care for a single person, maybe the war can be stopped. And of course, that's, in some ways that's ridiculous, but that's the religion he's after. Like, that's what is going to save him, if anything can. And that's sort of represented by the Bible, as that's what he's carried with him until now, sort of his magic feather. But now he's got to graduate from that and learn to treasure or to care for someone else. And that's what I think, if religion has done good in the world, that's what it is. It's caring for someone who's not yourself. And so Bagger is right, I think, that he doesn't need religion, but he does need to care about the world around him.
Mhm. You've just joined us, the final segment of my conversation with writer Daniel Kraus. Iowa Raised, latest novel, Angel Down, has earned him comparisons to Cormac McCarthy. Has been called this book called a new classic by the New York Times Book Review. Imagine Entertainment is developing Angel Down as a film. I think with you writing the screenplay, is that right?
Correct. Yes.
So this is your second collaboration with Imagine. After Whalefall, did you write the screenplay for that as well?
I co-wrote that screenplay with the director, Brian Duffield.
Mm-hmm. What are your biggest concerns when adapting a book to the screen?
Well, it kind of depends if I'm involved or not. Like if I'm not involved in the production, I'm not writing it. I don't really have many concerns. It's not my concern to have. Like the movie's going to be the movie, the book's going to be the book, and one won't cancel out the other. When I'm involved with it, yeah, it's, I obviously have my druthers about the story. There are things, I'm not very precious about such things. Like I'm very cognizant that of the differences between the mediums. But yeah, there's going to be things that certain elements and occasionally certain small details that to me are emblematic of why the story exists for me. But everything's, it's like taking the book and finding, all right, this book is going to be 1/50th the size. Like, how do I compact all this? So it's, in a weird way, it's not math, but there is a sort of almost a Tetris like feel to it. It's like, let's break this into pieces and then pick up the 50 most important pieces and somehow find a way to join them together that makes sense, and conserves the elements in a way. Like instead of talking about something 20 times throughout the book in little minor subtle ways, can you do it once? Can you do it twice? It's interesting. I find it completely different than writing novels. It exercises almost the opposite part of my brain that involves much more. It's much more methodical in a way. Like a screenplay can't be just infinitely long. There's a sort of page count you have to hit. You do at some point have to be mindful of like what can be pulled off. What might there be a budget to sort of show on screen. What kind of parts in it would attract actors that would want to play them. There's a lot that goes into it, but the key is to not get too concerned about any of it, which is how I approach books. Just at the end of the day, you just plow into it, and you go on gut and you go on feeling and emotion.
Whalefall, the adaptation of your novel Whalefall, coming out as a major motion picture starring Josh Brolin in the fall of this year, 2026. It follows a scuba diver who, while looking for his father's remains, is swallowed by a huge 60-ton sperm whale, I think.
Yeah.
And he has just 1 hour to get out before his oxygen runs out. What can you tell us about the making of that? You co-wrote the screenplay and you visited the set during production, I understand. What can you tell us about what you saw?
Well, I can't tell you much, but yeah, I was on set quite a bit, and
because contractually you're not able to, is that right?
Yeah, there's just you want to let 20th Century Fox sort of handle how information comes out. But I can say that it was very clear from the earliest pre-production meetings that these people were taking the scientific aspects of it extremely seriously. And that's how I approached the book, because I wasn't interested in writing it unless it was like biologically and scientifically plausible. Like all these things could really happen. And I was really gratified by the intensity with which they kept to that. Their studies of whales, and both inside and outside whales, and the construction of the stomach sets, and everything was handled with such attentiveness to biological detail. So I was very impressed with that.
Yeah, I mean, in your book, Whalefall, roughly half the book takes place when the scuba diver is inside the sperm whale. That must be an incredible set that you observed, and don't want to violate your 20th Century Fox vow there, but that must have been incredible to see what you had in your mind's eye and actually created as part of a set where actors would be in this set.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been anything quite like it. Like, this is a living set that breathes and pulses and moves and spins and turns over and dives, and it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. Let's circle back to where we started. You first saw, I understand, Night of the Living Dead from 1968, George Romero in 1968, when at the age of 5 in Fairfield, and you've seen it, is this true, hundreds of times?
My estimate is about 300 times, yeah.
Why? What were you looking for?
It's one of those things where everyone has their kind of comfort spot. And I don't, the funny thing is, I don't rewatch movies a lot. With this one incredibly big exception. It was just a movie again, it probably goes back to seeing it with my mom so many times as a kid. It just is comfort food for me.
Yeah.
And it, like all truly great pieces of art, it changed with me as I grew up. The movie I saw at 5 years old was not the movie I saw at 10 or 20 or 40. I take different things from it the older I get. And that's why I wrote a whole book about it.
Right. And I don't know if this is out yet. It's called Partially Devoured, How Night of the Living Dead Saved My Life and Changed the World.
Yes, that comes out March 10th. And yeah, it's a book-length study of a frame-by-frame study, almost in some parts, of the movie and what it means and what it meant to society and culture then and now. And woven through it is kind of my own story. So it's partially a memoir of how the movie changed me and helped me throughout the years.
Well, Daniel Kraus, we've run out of time. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you and learn about your inspirations to all the work that you've done here. I hope you'll come back on the show. Perhaps when Whalefall, the movie, comes out, we can have another chat.
Yeah, anytime, man. Just let me know.
Okay. Daniel Kraus, thank you so much. What a pleasure. Thank you for joining me from Chicago.
Of course, thanks.
Today's episode produced by Samantha McIntosh. Our executive producer is Catherine Perkins. I'm Ben Kiefer. Thanks for joining us.